Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's steering committee meeting. We are under the CNCF Code of Conduct. In short, be excellent to each other. This meeting will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube later. And Bob has just shared the agenda doc in the chat. So looks like first up we have setting up SIG etcd. I think that's just everyone on steering needs to look at this and make sure we've voted or requested changes.
Right now, it has the required number of approvals to merge. At this point, though, just want to give an extra day for people that haven't reviewed it yet to review it.
Yeah, 5 out of 7 with Tim and I pending. It's looking pretty good, but I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to do any discussion for this meeting, that we didn't have quorum for the last one. Yeah, overall looks pretty good to me. Tim, any comments?
There's a couple TBDs in the doc, most of which are just setting the steering liaison, which I think I just kind of a no-op, we figure that out. But the one on the repo location, do we have consensus on what we expect that to be?
Yep, they're going to stay in the etcd org, and we will just adopt the org.
And that adoption is not like a mechanical thing.
The GitHub management project will have to be granted access to manage it the same as our other orgs.
But we're managing it where it is. It's not.
Yeah, we're not migrating all the repos over to Kubernetes 6 or something like that. It would be pretty disruptive. And when we discussed it previously, I think there weren't any. I think that just made the most sense.
That's what I was interpreting, and yeah, okay. So
I think
yeah,
it also sends a better signal that we're not taking over etcd and turning it into just a Kubernetes thing or something. Like they're becoming part of the organization and getting support from us, but it's still kind of their own group within that. I think all the technical problems aside, suddenly announcing that we're moving all the repos would be a lot of fuss and just give that signal. It doesn't really help us. We already have to manage a handful of GitHub orgs.
Yeah, totally agree. That makes sense.
Yeah, if it makes sense at a later date for those repos to migrate, if there's some actual push or reason, we can revisit that discussion, obviously. But for now, there really isn't any added benefit. We can extend our current tooling and that kind of stuff to help manage that org as well.
It'll also become easier. The GitHub management team has been granted a enterprise copy of GitHub, so we can now sort of centrally manage multiple organizations. We have not rolled that out yet, though. Still got to sort that out.
With the bulk staying where it is, would we still, under K community, have a subdirectory for the SIG and repo and charter, at least kind of, I guess tombstone's the wrong word, but like a link off to the thing. So if somebody comes in from our normal processes and is expecting the normal artifacts, they see, jump off to other place.
Yeah, that should still be in place.
Yeah, that's in the PR. It's not substantially different than you don't know if a project's in Kubernetes SIGs or in Kubernetes, or maybe it's even wound up retired or something. Any further discussion on SIG etcd?
Are we good to release the hold at this point?
I'll do a final scan and sign off officially on the PR for releasing.
Okay.
Great. I think we should try to finish that up today. It's been a pretty long process. Thanks all. Okay. So sub-project leads. Bob, you want to talk about that?
I'll actually pass this to Naburin since he's the author of the PR.
Thanks for that.
So did you all have a chance to look at the PR once?
I guess my question is like, I'm sorry for missing this, but what was the motivation behind this change? I wasn't clear kind of going through it.
Yeah, the motive.
Sorry.
Bobby, you want to take it? Like, go for it.
So this has been long discussed in chairs and TLs, going well over a year now. And a way of trying to create an additional step in the ladder for people to sort of get recognition for the work that they're already doing. And with it being an official artifact in there, it's a lot easier for them to basically point and justify it for, internally for work or anything of the like. In general, too, it's just like, even though you might have multiple people in an owner's file, there is often just a handful of those that are actually the ones that are truly sort of like organizing all the work, especially if it happens to span multiple owners files across, different repos.
In addition, this also gives a good way for the SIGs to identify people who can transition into technical leads in the future. So when someone is a sub-project lead, you identify them as essentially subject matter experts for that sub-project. And eventually, if they creep into other areas, they broaden their expertise into other sub-projects. Eventually, you are actually identifying a technical lead for your SIG. So that's how it also makes it easier for the SIGs to identify future leaders, in addition to what Bob told.
Sorry, I guess I'm kind of missing how this is substantively different from a sub-project owner today, because at least this is what we're doing in SIG release, for example.
They generally don't have like a named entry in the like SIG documents. There's just like a pointer to the owner's file, which is maybe not super clear if you're not a member of the project. Or the like SIG README is a little more obvious, and we've kind of given people a named role.
Yeah, so
It's not a
sub-project owners
huge
are
difference.
not. Yeah, sub-project roles and sub-project owners are not named roles at this point in time. They're just a set of approvers and reviewers in a bunch of owner files spread across the sub-project.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the point. Is it's not a huge change. It's just trying to more explicitly call out that like we have people that are like running these sub projects, instead of just indirecting out to our like owner's file technical implementation of who has approval.
So why not recognize the existing sub-project owners or name the sub-project owner role as opposed to creating a new role?
This is largely because you're going to have owners that aren't like, especially in a sub project where you have multiple owners files, there's going to be different people across those owners files. And usually it's only going to be a couple people out of those lists of owners that are the ones that are truly the ones that are sort of organizing and shepherding all the work. A good example would be like Rob for Gateway API.
The actual diff is pretty much just an update to sub project owner. It isn't like it isn't like a new role next to it. It's just a bit of a reframe, I think.
This PR is saying that it's a net new role. That's why I'm asking. That's why I'm trying to dig in on it a little bit, because it seems like we could just name existing sub-project owners. Like if you're not covering I kind of feel like if you're not covering the area, then you're not actually a sub-project owner.
But the problem is like sub-project owners right now tends to, like, in people's heads, goes to people in an owner's file. Like that's the relationship there. That might not be as it's coded, but that's what people think. And so this pulling it out and having this sort of separate designation is a way to recognize the people from those subproject owners that are the ones that are organizing the work. Because not everyone that's an owner is usually the people that are truly leading that subproject. Also, if you want, you can go back and there is pages of notes and discussion with the chairs and TLs on this in the chairs and TLs doc.
Okay, I just gotta thunk on it, I guess, because it's like I'm hearing that there's not much of a diff. I'm hearing that they're functionally similar roles, but it seems like it's the same thing. So I'll look over the PR in a bit more detail and try to understand. But it doesn't seem like it's a new change.
It would also help if you read commit by commit, because there are some logical changes in there.
I'm just gonna keep from the chat. Clearly, I need to reread the diff myself. So I definitely recall this as sort of subsuming subproject owner. I think that maybe there are some subprojects where it makes sense, but I imagine there'll be a bunch of places where it'll be kind of similar to the chair TL split, where you'll just wind up copying the list of people from the owner's file into subproject lead.
Or at least the approvers out of them.
Right.
Yes, you would not necessarily copy everyone into subproject lead.
I imagine some SIGs might have that somewhere, but for example, in SIG testing, I don't think it would be. I don't think we currently would have an actual distinction on any of our projects.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, at the point that you're owning or you're a subproject owner for multiple sections, you probably should be named a tech lead.
Yeah, like all of our projects are going to point to the root owner's file, and if you have approval over the whole project, then you are a lead. Is like we don't really have more of a lead than that for any of our current projects. I mean, I suppose, for example, where this project's nested in a repo, there's a difference between the people working on the specific prow versus the whole of test infra, but we're already pointing to that owner's file, not the the top one in the repo. So it is just at least for our SIG, I think it's just going to be copying the list. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but.
So Bob, you mentioned in the chat just now KK, and that may be a good example. Is that where this the motivation came from?
Not just from there. It's mostly just a way of officially recognizing generally the fewer people out of the subset of people that are in an owner's file that are truly the ones driving the work. You might have someone as an approver that is good from a technical standpoint and that, but they aren't the ones necessarily doing issue triage and just again sort of doing everything to keep that sub project going. And that would be the big difference between an approver and a person that is actually a sub project lead.
Well, and if sub-project owner is just documenting owners files, there will be places like KK where it's really hard to make an individual owner's file align to everything in scope for a project, or there's overlap from people that aren't there's shared spaces and whatnot, and there may not be a clear here is the owner's file for this project, but here are definitely the people leading it.
There's a couple others that span repos and locations in KK to also other places in KSIGs. And it's again, we're just listing the various different owners the owner's files. And if you have this list of scattered owners, which one of those people are you going to contact if you have a thing for that subproject?
Okay, well, to me at least that sounds reasonable, but I definitely need to like read this and comment. I'll do that. I'll commit to doing that today. I don't know about everyone else. Does anyone else? It's kind of just been a few of us here. Does anyone else have comments on this? Going once, going twice. Okay, let's move to the funding topic. I believe that I saw that was Arnaud adding this.
Yes.
Do you have a brief intro for this one?
Yeah, so basically some of the maintainer in SIG Windows reached out to me about getting an environment where they can set up some kind of basically work on set up CI automation to run tests or on Windows instances. So I think the idea for them is to get an environment where they can work on that automation stuff and move that to test infra. So the idea is to get funding specifically from the AWS donation, give them, create an account and provide them access to that and having budget dollar around this. Yes, Christoph.
So two things. First, a question. So it's links to a previous issue where we had an LFX intern that was working on a project for a duration. Do we know if we've like tracked and reaped that account, if that account is no longer needed? Like, do we have a method for doing this and tracking like temporary assigning of developer accounts?
Not. We track expense in the sense that we can set order that if a specific threshold is reached, we can do that. That's possible, but tracking assignment to an individual is currently not really possible. So basically, we kind of give them access. We provide authorization at the project level. That's what we do.
So then the second part of this is a comment. We've now had multiple requests for this kind of thing. And there has been also historical asks to either the Kubernetes project or at the CNCF level for access to cloud resources in order to support development. And in those historical cases, there's also been cases where it's been abused, where we have granted access to cloud credentials and cloud credits and accounts, and they have not been used for the thing that they were supposed to be used for. So this is an area where, number one, it's my personal opinion that I don't think steering should be involved in this. Like, I think we should make sure that it's clear that we're delegating authority out to a SIG. And I think in this case, SIG, Kate's Infra makes sense to me, that Kate's Infra can make these decisions and not bottleneck on steering. But also, I think that the SIG that's responsible for this needs a policy for when and where and how these requests can be granted. And like, maybe there's a threshold of like, hey, if the request is for this under this duration or under this amount of money, the SIG can just grant those credits at their discretion in accordance with their policy. Or if it's above a certain threshold, then it needs to come up to steering as far as like assigning resources. But I don't think steering necessarily needs to be involved in every like individual developer account. But I also think that we should consider steering and Kate's Infra should consider whether this is a thing that we want to support, whether this is a thing and a system that we want to invest credits in. Because I can understand us wanting to ensure we have CI jobs that utilize cloud credits, but assigning developer accounts out of our cloud credits gets messy, because you need to have some kind of policy about when to ensure fairness, like when and where and how we assign those credits to people, how we reap them, all of that kind of stuff.
If this were the Kate's Info meeting, I would dive into how we manage that and that have thoughts, but I think we probably should take that there. I think we still need the funding ask procedure, but just for things that we don't already have. So it like if we're generally saying we're in favor of using the existing credit supplies for developer accounts, then this does, go to Kate's Infra going forward. But that might be like a more general guidance from maybe even steering, unless we're just saying we're totally always delegating 100% every aspect of how you might use the cloud credits, which I think would also be fine, but we should probably make that clear. I also agree that there's some thorny bits with handing out developer accounts, and I'm not sure who should deal with that or what that policy should look like, or if we need to overthink it. Because also, if it isn't a big cost and like infra or steering or whoever manages this does a good job not letting it get out of hand, then it should be fine. Like, I think the stuff that's happened in the past has been a drop in the bucket.
There also I think one of the concerns is basically how we define that selling for each individual trying to access to a specific project, because until now we never really saw abuse of those credits. But assuming it's possible, it's difficult to basically define where is the selling, because people come to us and say, I would like that specific amount, but never basically get 90% of that, never use 90% of that. So we think it's fine, but I think it's hard to basically define the threshold between, hey, we will give you that regardless of what you're doing, or you have to be specific about your request. I think we need a bigger conversation about this, but for the moment, how we handle that request.
So I think in the narrow, this makes sense to approve, but it opens up an area where we should ask for a policy process from Kate's Infra. And it sounds like Ben's got ideas. I don't know the extent to which things are
not about the
possible.
policy, about possible problems with this particular request. I think that by policy we've previously permitted similar requests, and that it's short term, and we should probably just let them move forward and async start figuring out, like,
yeah, I meant more
what are the rules. I don't think we should block this group on like, oh wait, we haven't been doing this with rules, because we've let other people before, and this should be small and temporary. But we should have rules. To the specific one though, when we've done it in the past, it has mostly been on GCP, where we have like named projects, and it's really obvious on the spend that like, oh, someone's dev account is using X amount, and we can keep an eye for that and close it out. And we have had dev accounts that have kind of lasted a little bit longer than we thought and closed them out. With the way that we view AWS visibility, I don't think we have good. We have much better tooling for like, this is the services that we're spending on, and not the accounts. So it'll be a little bit harder to keep an eye on, but I think that's something Kate's Infra will have to solve. And hopefully not a blocking problem for this request, I don't think, but something to consider long term is not just having policy, but actually being able to follow through on it. And like we don't have like spend controls, we just have the check every 2 weeks at the SIG meeting and look for anything that's out of place. So that's also worth considering when you hand people accounts. That happens, but the same thing can happen through CI code. So if you give a sub-project access to an account indirectly through their CI, they can still go and run up a huge bill anyhow. I think we should just approve this, but we should have a follow-up on, do we all agree that we should just hand this off to Kate Semfra, and then if it's either Kate Semfra or steering, whoever is going to own this going forward needs to make a policy for dev accounts.
Yeah, I think it would be good to have something of a work back, at least for something like this, where scale testing is in the mix and it has the potential to get out of control. Like, what do you need to do? How long do you need to do it for? And what are your gates for success? Like knowing that, I think, would be helpful. But I agree. I think in the on the long term, we've talked about these requests in the past a few times at steering meetings, and I think we've landed roughly on this should be within, say, Kate's first charter to execute on.
Yeah, I think that we should be available if they're looking for advice on like how is best, but it seems like, in theory, this is not necessarily a technical committee anyhow, and Kate Semfra is the technical group we've delegated the accounts to, so they should just manage this. And Arnaud, I'll show up in the Kate Semfra meeting to discuss it there with that hat on.
Should we make a point of formally asking that the SIG work up something for a plan? Like, I'm imagining even just pragmatically that we start with a spreadsheet of like, these people are assigned, and at least on occasion go back and say, hey, are you still using that, or has access been turned down? Like, something simple. Doesn't have to be initially massive and beautiful automation, but to not lose track of them, I think would be important somehow.
I mean, as it stands, we're not even really enforcing like spend limits on anything until it gets out of hand. Like no one's saying, SIG node, you get this much credit and this is your cap. Like we don't have any of that today for anything. It's just when we notice something's going up a lot, then there's some kind of pragmatic discussion within the SIG on how can we cut it and is this reasonable? But those have been happening in SIG Kate Semfra and not in steering.
Yeah.
The other thing, at least with regards to like dev account versus CI, is with just a straight dev account, it's a lot easier to spin up, other unrelated things. And that has been things that have happened in the past. So that is just the, sort of the broader concern around just a straight dev account versus, again, using our CI.
One last point to bring it back into focus a little bit. I think the initial ask isn't specifically about what accounts will be used or things, and it even mentions that like they'd like to do Azure at some point. So for those sorts of things, we still have funding requests because we may do things outside of the accounts, but since there's a suggestion to just use the accounts, I think that's what makes it delegated to SIG Kate Semfra. But there's still the possibility for people to say like, I need to test on another platform, or there's some reason that it shouldn't be on those accounts, and for steering to review that. I think the funding template is useful even for infrastructure. It just should be defaulting to asking SIG Kate Semfra first, and coming to us if Kate Semfra doesn't think it's a fit for the existing funds.
I think we can do some kind of redirect in the issue template that say if you need funding approval for infrastructure reach out to Gates Infra. And in general, you just stay in steering because funding is not only about Gates Infra.
And to that point, we don't have Azure resources today.
Yeah, I
So
think
if
that
they
makes
wanted
sense.
to do that, then like they would have to make a request. Any other thoughts on this topic?
So I tried to capture what it was sounding like might be consensus in the notes, but do you want to look at that and see if you agree? I don't want to write down something that's perceived as our steering decision when it's sort of vague forming of notes based on what's been discussed in a very back and forth way.
Yeah, I only see one very minor point. It says unsure or reject, but there's also the case where like they just like this thread mentions Azure in the future, and Gates Infra can't provide them that because we don't actually have community-owned Azure accounts to grant access to. And
Yeah,
so in
but
that case, they're gonna have to talk to like that. Probably winds up involving steering.
yeah, but I think currently they are not looking for a specific cloud provider. They're looking for an environment where they can basically build tooling need for CI.
Right.
Needed for CI.
So,
So
The current issue.
So
Sorry.
go for it and close the thought.
Oh, the current issue doesn't need to come to steering. I was just saying that they like, as an aside, mentioned something where that like would be a case that might come to us where they went to Gates Infra and it isn't that Gates Infra rejected it. It's just Gates Infra currently can't provide those resources, which is a little bit different from being rejected, as opposed to what was written in the consensus. But Tim put an update for that. Apologies all. I'm still getting used to video call latency again after going back and doing meetings in person. Stephen, did you have something else on that?
No, I knew that you were going to complete her shared thought. So I'm fine. I think, given we don't have the capacity to vote here, let's just comment on the issue if we need to close this out.
Yeah, I was just going to leave a comment to the effect of that the current ask is the sort of thing that would go to Gates Infra first, and it sounds like they can handle that.
The other thing we can do as a follow-up is like just draft some language to update the issue template. But like if you have an infrastructure request, actually it might be good to create an issue template in Kids.io or someplace for this sort of thing. And then we can point to that from there for start here for infrastructure requests.
All right, I took the question mark off of consensus and put a colon. So we got 3 points there I think we aligned on. Anything else?
Thanks, Tim. I definitely got behind on the notes there. I think that's it for the agenda today. I see a few other people in attendance that didn't say anything today. Do you have anything, the rest of y'all? Okay, well, have a good rest of your day. Thanks for coming, everyone. Have a good one.
Later, y'all.
Bye.
Later.